Welcome to my ranking series of every Soulsborne plus Sekiro plus Elden Ring areas from awful to amazing, and all the many tiers in between. This will most likely be a 3 or 4 part series in which I'll be talking about my own preferences, which, shockingly, might not match your own. Also, don't expect the inclusion of super minor areas like the main hubs, or massive open world zones in Elden Ring. I will, however, count all the legacy dungeons, as well as anything that resembles them. So with all that said, let's begin. Oh, wait, no, I don't want to talk about FRIGID. So, when we talk about good level design, what does this truly mean? In my opinion, this is achieved by making a level with diverging paths, some leading to meaningful discoveries, others tying back into the main path, some clever shortcuts. This way you can make a small space feel massive. And to make the level actually fun to play in, you need a variety of enemies in different and fun scenarios. As a bonus, making the place have a distinct visual style or atmosphere does go a long way to make it memorable. Does FRIGID Outskirts accomplish all this? Well, what do you think? No! It's the exact opposite of everything. It's a massive, wide open field with nothing in it. It looks boring, and it's essentially just a straight walk to the boss once you know which direction to go. And even when you do know, it takes roughly 5 minutes to get there. All while you get a blinding snowstorm appearing every so often, and with it, a single enemy that keeps reappearing all the fucking time. And the worst part of all this, if you get to the boss and die, you don't get a bonfire or a shortcut, you just gotta do the run all over again. And the horses are specifically designed to stop you from outrunning them. You have to fight them. I've only ever encountered one single person that's ever liked FRIGID Outskirts, and currently he's residing in a mental institution. Welcome to Black Gulp. This area is a bukkake of poison statues jizzing on you from all sides as you move through a straight line to a boss. Again, at least it's a much shorter line than FRIGID Outskirts, but those few minutes aren't any more enjoyable. I really don't know what they were thinking here. Did they actually think anyone would bother to destroy the statues? Or was having the player get stunned and poisoned for every step they took the intended experience? This is garbage either way. It's so bad that when I asked if I should include Black Gulch as part of the gutter, people thought it would be a disservice to the gutter. We're talking about the gutter here! So for this single spot we've got Cave of the Dead with its Black Gulch statues, only now they petrify you instead of poison, which is an instant kill if it fully builds up. There's Iron Passage with a shit ton of enemies who slow you down as you're running along narrow tunnels. Or you can try your luck with the trap gates that stay open for a few seconds while you're getting bombarded with fireballs and enemies, which isn't really a much quicker way to the boss anyway, so it's kinda pointless. And of course there's also Memory of Soulsborne, which always comes up whenever people talk about why they prefer Fume Knight over Soulsborne, which is honestly fair. I've had to do it so many times because I love Soulsborne so much that I've gotten pretty good at running past all of it. But even so, that doesn't change the fact that all 3 of these, as well as FRIGID Outskirts, were made to just waste your time before letting you fight a boss, which 3 times out of 4 isn't a worthwhile boss anyway. Since Lost IZALITH hasn't showed up yet, I guess you could say I think Demon Ruins is worse. But, well, not to give anything away, but Lost IZALITH might be next up, so I don't exactly think the difference is notable. But I think what sucks more about Demon Ruins is the enemy placements. Again, Lost IZALITH isn't much better in that regard either, I know, but this is like legendary levels of bad enemy placement. Like, just look down there, oh my fucking god! It just copy-pasted Taurus demons, one after another, next to each other. Negative thought was put into this, and while that bit is entirely optional, the equally as lazy lineup of Capra demons is not. There's nothing less interesting than having the same enemy in a clear line you can see, where you kill one at a time. And not to mention, these guys retroactively make the early game bosses, who they're the exact copy of, much less special. This place doesn't have Bed of Chaos, I'll give it that, but what we do get isn't a huge improvement. Lost IZALITH is probably about as infamous as FRIGID Outskirts, and it's clearly the victim of rushed development, just like Demon Ruins. It starts out with a massive lake of lava, which used to be hideous to look at, but it's not quite as bad in the remake, though the sound of walking in it does really start to become irritating after a while. And there's I don't know how else to put it, dragon asses. They're actual dragon asses. They probably hoped people wouldn't recognize them and think they're some weird demons, but no, they're fucking dragon asses. At least it's not too hard to run past them. They don't aggro unless you get close, because you really don't want to fight them. Mostly this place serves as a long run-up to the worst boss I've ever fought, Bit of Chaos. And I reckon that's one of the main reasons people despise this place. There's only one bonfire between the start of the area and the boss, and it's hidden because fuck you, I guess. The only slight resemblance of okayishness in this place is the architecture of the temple. It looks interesting enough. I don't mind this section as much as I do hate running through it, all those times I'm dying to the boss. But all in all, the Demon Ruins Lost IZALITH experience does always make me want to just quit playing the game. Despite being cut off from the clutches of the Black Gulch, the gutter on its own doesn't really fare much better in my book. It is less poisony, but it's also longer. Honestly, I think this place is just fucking terrible. It's not very hard. Most enemies are either basic hollows or these weird skinless tigers that have a single attack, but they couldn't even program that right. Its hitboxes are all over the place. Out of all the Valley of Defilement copies, this one failed most miserably at capturing that atmosphere that they must have thought was cool enough to reuse in every game pretty much. At least in, say, Blighttown, it's kinda got its own vibe. Even FARRON does. But the gutter? Nothing. Just planks of wood and darkness. It's so boring and uninteresting, and I can't even feel relieved when it's over because I know what comes next. Dark Chasm of Old gets old very fast. It's got the same principal philosophy of the Dark Souls 2 DLC sub-areas, where it feels like the goal is to make you as annoyed as possible before letting you fight a boss, which is actually a worthwhile encounter this time. You have 3 different caves you can do in any order you choose, and the last one will serve as the run back to Dark Lurker. And every time you die, it costs a human effigy to re-enter. Very cool, Dark Souls 2. I don't really find the caves themselves that terribly annoying. They're not fun, but it's not as bad as the DLC run-ups, that's for sure. It just sucks that you're forced to kill every single enemy before you can continue. But the real crime here is what they've done to my boy, Dark Lurker. Or girl, I don't know. This is a legitimately great boss and no one wants to do it. And it's all because of the lead up to it. For that reason, Dark Chasm of Old is awful. Tomb of the Giants is a place with a vision-based gimmick. Gone wrong, gone sexual. Sound familiar? This one is at least cool on paper. I could see this being legitimately creepy and fun in some dark MOHGWYN-esque forest. Instead, they chose a slippery sloped cave where you have to move one step at a time to make sure you're not walking off a ledge, or into the lap of dorky-style enjoying giant skeletons, which are the worst enemies ever made. It does get considerably less agonizing when, or if, you get your hands on a skull lantern, and there's some baby skeletons that probably shouldn't make me laugh, but I'm an awful person, and they do. I mean, look at them. It's so adorable. I love killing them. The beginning of this area is the absolute worst, though. The previous bonfire that isn't hidden is at the start of the catacombs, and this is when you most likely won't have a lantern yet. I'm not creeped out thinking how dark and scary this place is, I'm just terrified of falling and having to run back. This place is just never fun, besides when I'm killing babies. This is by far the most bizarrely designed area in the series. There's 2 roads you can choose. One leads you to a platforming section in a game without a jump function, and it ends up being the fastest way to the possibly hardest boss in the game, Flame Lurker. The shittiest part about it is that mandatory falling damage must be taken in a game that has all its healing items be consumed on use. Fuck that! The other path isn't much better either. It leads you to a very cool looking open underground ecosystem. But it's inhabited by bear bugs. These are the worst enemies ever made. Even the smallest variants of them are tankier than fucking Hank the Tank. As for the big ones, have fun smacking them for the next 10 minutes. It's absolutely horrible, what were they thinking? And they don't really have any specific exploitable weakness to bypass this. So mostly I just run past everything right down into the bowels of a bearbug infested asshole. And here there's at least one giant bearbug that you have to kill in order to progress. Talking about this is just making me upset. Let's look at Hank the Tank again. He's so adorable. Stepping into Shrine of AMANA was such a breath of fresh air after the bleakness of most of the rest of the game. For all the faults in Dark Souls 2's area designs and lack of detail, the use of colors is just infinitely better than in Dark Souls 3. But Then you start to actually play the game in Shrine of Amana, and you just want to go back to the bleakness because, good god, they went out of their way to design the most annoying and unfun area they possibly could. And to give credit where credit is due, they outdid themselves in that department. They came up with the perfect recipe for frustration. Step 1. Have water everywhere that slows you down. Step 2. Tanky enemy ganks that aren't impeded by said water. Step 3. Have enemies hidden under the water. Step 4. Enemies blocking a cave exit while farting your gear to pieces. And finally, Step 5. Mages everywhere, spamming shitty hitbox, homing dildos. And voila, you've got yourself the nastiest shit soup imaginable. As tasty as it looks. Smoldering Lake to me is everything that's wrong in Dark Souls 3 pretty much. The first half of it is a giant open field and it just makes me wish I could summon Torrent because there's no way in hell I'm gonna bother walking all around this shithole. Oh, and there's a ballista constantly firing at you. And while I think area gimmicks aren't necessarily a bad thing, they can help make the place stand out. A similar mechanic kinda worked in Bloodborne. Not here though. Fuck the ballista. The only good thing about it is that it can kill the giant worm for you. Then we have the Demon Ruins. It has spammy enemies, it reuses assets from the catacombs, it looks incredibly dull, and it seems its only purpose is to be a half-assed nod to Dark Souls 1. After all this mind-numbing exploration, you finally reach the top where you have the ballista, and you kill 2 skeletons and it's over. No reward at all, except that you can now explore the lake without interruption. Wow, thank you, exactly what I want. More Smoldering Lake. And here we have the original sin, the one that started it all, Swamp of Sorrows. Appropriately named as this place is absolutely miserable. I'm mourning the death of enjoyment whenever I slog through this awful swamp. And out of all the swamps, this one has the most annoying mechanic. Not only does it slow you down and poison you, but it also prevents you from rolling. If you try to roll, you get stuck in a few second long animation, which, if you do accidentally in a heated situation, it can be enough to completely screw you over. Why not just remove the roll function? Why have this fucking animation be in its place? Why do they hate us so much? Now, people tend to defend Swamp of Sorrows by saying, the little village at the end isn't that bad. Sure, it's not that bad, but it's not that good either. It's just planks of wood and a whole lot of annoying goblins. While it is entirely my fault, I always tend to fall off the platforms and have to circle around at a snail's pace. So even though it's not absolute garbage, I don't see any argument for why it's good either. And 90% of the level is still diarrhea. Speaking of Farron Keep, here's diarrhea. Out of all the areas in this game, did Farron Keep really have to be the one with forced exploration? Yes? Well, okay. As a result of having to find and light all 3 fires to unlock the gate to proceed, this swamp is absolute pace killer of every new playthrough I have. It's so big and confusing and everything looks the same. Even the hills where you light the fires, they're all the exact same asset. There's been times when I've seen one of those hills and figured I've already lit the fire there, but no, I haven't even been there yet. This area alone makes me not want to replay the game because it takes too long to do and is too annoying to do. The poison doesn't do that much damage, but it does still slow you down, and whenever you do get on solid ground, it's not much more enjoyable, thanks to the goat fuckers. Lake of Rot is an abysmal area, no doubt. It's a wide open lake of, well, you guessed it, rot. And this is by far the most potent poison in any area. So if you set out in any direction, you know you're just on a timer before you have to reset or die when you inevitably run out of flasks. But the reason why this area isn't at the very bottom is because I don't think Lake of Rot actively makes Elden Ring a worse game. All the other ones so far do. But this place, it's out of the way, it's quick to run through, the Scarlet Rot doesn't slow you. It does suck if you want to explore it, but there isn't too much incentive for that. You could fight the 10th Dragonkin soldier, but it's most likely not worth your time. Grand Cloister is included in this area, and it doesn't really make it worse or better. It has less Scarlet Rot, but other than that, I don't really feel like wasting time clearing out all the kindreds of rot. So, it's a shit area, but it doesn't really upset me. I'm sorry, I don't hate Dark Souls 2. I don't mean to be just shitting on the entire game here. I think it's a fun overall experience. It's just when you look at many of the things on their own, many of them, such as Iron Keep, just fall flat. I guess now would be a good time to mention that all the areas for Dark Souls 2 I'm judging based on Scholar of the First Sin edition. I've heard the vanilla Iron Keep is much more tame, but I've never had the pleasure of not getting my dick stuck in a grinder. The first half of this place is absolutely fucking terrible. It's one enemy after another, after another, after another, after another, after another, after another. Fuck! And should you die, you can't really beeline to the boss, you're just gonna have to start from scratch and clean out the entire fortress again. And I don't like Iron Keep as a location. It doesn't have good atmosphere because it shouldn't even exist. How is it on top of a fucking windmill? Where is it? Now, if you get past the lynching simulator, the rest of Iron Keep isn't that bad. It's not that good either. It's a linear path to the next boss, but at least you can get some enjoyment out of dipping enemies into lava. At the very least, I can say that Iron Keep is the best out of the awful tier. Now, let's move on to better things, even if only slightly so. The King's Tower is the finale of Boletaria, and it ends on a violent, explosive fart. It has a trio of black phantom cocksuckers that hit like trucks, but it's most notable for its use of dragons as obstacles. My problem with the dragons is that there isn't much room for experimentation. You don't know how the dragons work until you've seen how they adapt to you running across. You can time the first little bit of the bomb rush, but after that you have no way of knowing where the fire will be next, or when. Or if you should keep running, or wait for the next opening. And guessing wrong will simply lead to your death. At least they added one little shortcut before the boss. It's still a bad run back, but Jesus fucking Christ, it used to be so much worse. Now this place is so small that maybe I should have excluded it like I did many other minor areas, like Rest in Peace, Valley of the Drakes, So Long, Cemetery of Ash. You won't be missed, Consumed King's Garden, you bitch. But I guess this has more of its own theme going, as shitty as it is. Fittingly named, Abandoned Dungeon feels like they left it there and figured they'd finish it later if they have time or resources. They didn't, so it's just a nothing area that mostly serves to connect 3 areas together: Ashina Castle, Senpo Temple, and Ashina Depths. It does that well enough, but nothing else. It's not annoying to go through, it's just nothing. Why am I even talking about this place? I really should have left this one out too. Undead Crypt is a shitty main path, with decent enough exploration around the sides of it. I like how the area literally tells you, don't you dare light the fires! Knowing that's exactly what you'll do now. Doing so will make it a little easier to see, but I'm not sure if it's worth all the invaders you'll now have to deal with for the rest of the level. But there's the door guys, which are pretty funny, I like them. But what went wrong for this area, in my opinion, is the enemy spawning mechanic. At first it seems like the goal is to not accidentally ring these bells or you'll summon a swarm of enemies, but you'll soon realize the real danger is other enemies reaching the bells themselves. And it especially sucks in this big room with a bunch of undead at different points going for the bells. And if they're successful, it's a fucking awful gangbang. And the awful hallway leading up to the boss always ensures that the Undead Crypt leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Doors of FARROS is in some ways a breath of fresh air by the point you arrive. It's far less ganky than most areas so far, you just kill one enemy at a time in mostly straight lines. So it's definitely less frustrating than, say, Iron Keep. But is it actually good? No. It's an extremely mediocre area that relies on a single gimmick to make it stand out: the titular doors of FARROS. And you know what? None of them are worth opening. Sometimes there's shitty loot, sometimes absolutely nothing, sometimes enemies. And while the upper sections are pleasantly devoid of enemy masses, the water-flooded parts are absolute ass! With the dog rats that inflict toxic. I'm sorry, but this is yet another L from Dark Souls 2. ALDIA'S Keep has a pretty cool mad scientist theme to it and a couple memorable enough moments, like seeing the giant basilisk that's only able to attack if you're right in front of it, getting jump-scared by big fat hippo men, seeing astronauts at their work, and of course, if you light all the torches, you get a really awesome unexpected moment of the giant dragon skeleton waking up. Other than that though, the level is extremely dull. It boils down to mostly being one hallway with rooms to the side. And I have to say, I absolutely despise the hippo cyclops motherfuckers! Worst enemies ever made! And I mean it this time. The pit is the gaping asshole in the middle of Majula that fittingly enough leads you to the gutter, a complete shithole. But it can also lead you to Grave of Saints, a place that is barely worth talking about. It's just rats and uninteresting hallways. But at least it's one of the only times they placed a bonfire right before a boss in Dark Souls 2. Even if that boss is Royal Rat Vanguard, so you're not gonna die unless you're actively trying to. Even though I don't like the platforming sections that are too often present in these games, I do like the placement of the pit. It's going to catch your attention and keep you wondering what's at the bottom, and you won't be able to really explore it until later in the game, even if the answer to your questions isn't really satisfying. IRITHYLL Dungeon initially was kind of a cool area to me, but this was before I had played Demon's Souls, where I discovered there's the same area, but actually good. So now I just don't see much value in IRITHYLL Dungeon. The atmosphere was literally the only thing it had going for it, and it's not even the least bit original. Every enemy encounter in this place is fucking annoying. You know it, I know it, everyone knows it. The jailers are abysmal. There's very few times I think these games are actually unfair, but I really think these bastards are bullshit. They drain your max health to nothingness by just looking at you, and they're very rarely alone, so you'll often get one-shot by anything in the vicinity. The max health decrease wouldn't be that big of a deal to me if when the effect wears off, your health is restored to where it was. Instead, all that health is gone and you gotta chuck Estus. And don't even get me started on the room with 10 or so jailers. What the hell were they smoking when they designed this room? The only thing I still like to this day is the creepy dragon baby monsters. Also, I figured I'd add Profane Capital into the same spot here. It's definitely less annoying and it has one of the most unsettling enemy designs in the game, but all in all it's a letdown in its lack of, well, anything. Am I an asshole for putting HEIDE'S Tower of Flame this low? I know people kinda like it because it looks pretty and bright. And I will say the enemies are appropriately slow and easy to read for such an early game area. But let's talk about the level design. Oh wait, there is no level design. It's the most bland, straightforward and uninteresting layout I've ever seen. You just go straight, kill one enemy, continue straight, kill another, and eventually there's a shit boss. At least they do mix things up once you've killed Dragon Rider and the Hide Knights wake up from their crippling depression. But they're janky as fuck to fight and it just makes the run up to the old Dragon Slayer even worse. Here you have the worst use of a dragon obstacle probably in the entire series, even counting King's Tower. The only time you're able to run up to the dragon unscathed is when it's still sleeping, but if it happens to wake up while you're fighting other enemies, which is very likely, it's impossible to reach without getting hit. Also, it can breathe fire through solid stone, and if you die you're gonna have to kill every single enemy again, because this is what happens when you make a straight narrow line as your level. I'm sorry, it does look nice, but it's not nice to play in. Harvest Valley and Earthen Peak is yet another addition to the long lineup of poison areas in Dark Souls 2, as well as another addition to the bottom 2 tiers of areas in the series. Harvest Valley is just an Auschwitz simulator. It's nothing but poison gas everywhere and loot to lure you in it. But it's somehow less of a problem than the poison jars in Earthen Peak, the giant windmill. Breaking one of those jars when you're close to them is pretty much instant poison. And was it really necessary to make the mannequins also inflict poison? What is it with poison? Is it someone's fetish in the Dark Souls 2 dev team? But I feel like I could be okay with the windmill area if they just calm down and let you explore in peace without trying to annoy and trick you at every turn. It's kind of maze-like in its design, which is definitely better than most we've seen thus far on this list, but I just never enjoy it. I just wanna go home. And by far the dumbest decision in this entire area. Oh my god, can I even say it without molding out? I'll do my best. If you want to be able to fight the boss of this area without being drenched in poison, you have to burn the windmill in this one very specific little spot that has no prompt or any hint. You just have to light up a torch and know that you can interact with it. Why is it like this? Who thought? Where? The more I think, the more I despair. So MOHGWYN Palace could be seen as part of Cyovra River, however the fuck you say it, but it's a 180 in atmosphere that I think it should be ranked separate, and as its own thing, it's kinda bad. And it's a shame because it has some genuinely good things going for it, they just fumbled in its execution. I like the remix of Evil Orb Oryx, but they're terrible to fight in such large quantities, and that's the only context you'll see them in. The disgusting bird monsters are also a well done remix, but the blood swamp you find them in is a disaster. There's dogs and random NPC invaders coming in whenever they feel like to ruin the enjoyment. At least the dogs have finally been fixed so they don't one-shot you. Then upon reaching the palace itself, it's just another graveyard full of zombies. They do explode in a funny way, but I feel like I've done this area already in Raya Lucaria. The only thing that kinda works for me in this area is the Sanguine Nobles, even if they only appear very briefly. Before I end this video, I figured we should have at least one Bloodborne area appear so I don't look like too much of a biased fanboy. And out of all of them, can it really be argued that it's not Byrgenwerth? Well, probably could be. No one likes Nightmare Frontier or Yargul. But this one is by far the most disappointing location in the game. It's hyped up for a while too, and you can see it in the distance in Forbidden Woods. Lore-wise, it's one of the most important places in the story, and it's one building that you circle around, go inside, fight one annoying shitty NPC, and then it's done. I do enjoy dropping her down into the lake at least. For some reason, there's 2 shortcuts in here. What the hell's the point of this one? Who uses this? No one! I also included Lecture Hall as part of Byrgenwerth, because lore-wise they're the same building. It would have been nice if they were actually connected, because as it is, Lecture Hall boils down to being a train station between nightmares. Both areas do have an alluring atmosphere when you first step in, and the unique creepy enemies do help. I don't hate going through them, I'm just a little sad thinking how good they could have been. And that's it for part 1 of this series. Next time, we'll be looking at the mediocre areas. So, I can't wait. Remember to subscribbly wibbly, and I'll see you next time.